India will complete its 65 years of independence on 15th August. Since independence, the Indian economy has grown tremendously, especially after adopting free market principles and liberalization to international trade under the guidance of Manmohan Singh. The economy of India is the 11th largest in the world by nominal GDP and the third largest by purchasing power parity. The country is one of the G20 major economies and a member of BRICS. India recorded the highest growth rates in the mid-2000s and is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. India has recorded a growth of over 200 times in per capita income in the period from 1947 to 2011. Well, the growth was led primarily due to a huge increase in the size of the middle class consumer, a large labor force, growth in the manufacturing sector due to rising education levels and engineering skills, and considerable foreign investment. Despite having tremendous potential to grow robustly, there are issues hampering the further growth of the economy. As part of the 65 years of celebrating independence, we are talking to different industry experts to know more about what drove the Indian economic growth after independence and what are the issues that need to be addressed today. Well, we are now joined by Mr. Niranjan Hiranandani, who is the chairman of the Indian Merchant Chambers in our show. Sir, welcome to the show.
Thank
we
you.
are celebrating 65 years of independence, very young and vibrant economy, 65 years of independence and 2 decades of liberalization. What is the state of the economy today? Though we are a young, vibrant and most celebrated emerging economies as far as the economists are concerned.
I think we have a very positive story in terms of demographics, in terms of democracy.
Right.
And I think 1991 was a threshold where we did a perestroika
Right.
with the rest of the world, and I think lot of sectors including TV, telecom, you name it, and automobiles industry, I think there was a real revolution of sorts. You were able to reach the markets, be able to get every automobile was now available, whether it's the Maruti right up to the Mercedes Benz. So I think a paradigm has taken place in the economy where we've been able to do. On the bare necessities, I think if you talk about roti, kapda, makan,
Right.
I think we've been able to achieve roti and kapda. But makan seems to be a far-fetched idea, and lot of people are suffering on this. So I think though we have succeeded in many sectors of the economy, and a vibrant sector with IT growth and intellectual people, as you said, vibrant middle class, I think there's a beautiful story. With some riders, I think two. One, I think on the story of housing, we have failed.
Right.
On the story of infrastructure, we are far behind what we need to do.
Right.
So the growth story in these two sectors, having said being behind, I think there is a beautiful opportunity ahead that these sectors where we have a gap, we should be able to fulfill in the next couple of years.
It's a huge opportunity. When we say the infrastructure sector, it's assumed that $1 trillion investment is needed, and there are investors who can fill this gap also. So talking about the inflation and growth, see, we are seeing the inflationary pressure, and RBI is also fighting with, it's always inflation versus growth, means deficit versus development. That was the challenges which RBI is facing for a number of years. There were fears also we may face stagflation also. What's your take on this inflationary pressures, and how is it hampering the growth in a wider way?
I think there is a genuine fear which the Reserve Bank has because of the fact that food is going to be a product of the monsoon.
Right.
And I think there's a genuine inflationary tendency which has to be curbed. But you have to understand that credit policies are directly not going to help in terms of the overall situation in terms of it, because if there is a supply shortage of food, I don't think credit policy is going to be able to do much. So I personally, on behalf of Indian Merchants Chamber, we are looking at a more liberal credit policy. We are very pleased with what the RBI did in the last policy in terms of SLR rates. I think almost 1 percentage point 23% came down. But actually it's much more than that, because SLR as exists today is about 28, 29. And we're talking from 24 to 23. So you really, the banks have much bigger opportunity than what is stated in the RBI statement. So I think RBI is also looking at growth along with inflationary control. So indirectly, I think the rates of interest will fall. SBI has already taken the lead. We have seen a 50 basis points correction in the rates by our SBI. So I think while taking into consideration inflation, growth is also a thing which the banks are looking very positively too. So I think we'll be able to try and match both these sectors.
Yes, sir. The domestic banks also wants to fund many projects. Talking about the international capital also, if we see last 1.5 months also, there are global rating agencies are also downgrading the Indians investment climate. As far as the investment climate is concerned, we need capital, either domestic or international. There are different sectors, critical sectors you can say, they are thriving for the foreign capital, also like power, infrastructure. Of course, it is always supported by domestic as well as the foreign capital. Do you think the international investors are looking India still as a very attractive investment destination as far as the markets is concerned, as far as our critical sectors are concerned?
There are two angles. First of all, that I think everybody all over the world is looking at India. Right. Very excited, very happy, and I think they're looking at a growth story in a very positive angle they are. But two aspects are hindering them at this point of time. One is that the policies are very, very varying. Take for example in the case of SEZs. Right. Government of India said that they're going to make it tax-free for 10 years. They've changed that policy. Right. So I think what is scaring the investor is that you make a policy and then change it even for the people who have already invested money into the country. So I think that's a dangerous sign and we should never do it. On the other hand, there is a temporary phase where international investments are insecure in their own countries. Right. So let's say real estate is fallen in America. Right. So the opportunities of buying real estate is bigger in America than in India. Right. So at this point of time, there may be a separate, what I call a hiccup. Right. And there may be a time gap between the fact that they want to invest and actually invest. Right. But you know, if we keep our markets clear and our policies secure, where the person knows exactly what he's getting into, I promise you, there's going to be huge investments in the next couple of years, both in housing, both in infrastructure and other sectors also. So I think the world is looking at India very excitedly, may not be in the very short term, but in the long term, very exciting. I've been talking to people and they're very happy with India.
It's really sound music to the ears also. So talking about we'll definitely come to real estate sector, which is very close to everyone's heart. But talking about the power sector, infrastructure sector, where the banks are also not funding those projects because they couldn't fund it also. Maybe a coal supply problem, maybe a tenure problem, interest rate, because we are facing the high interest rate also. These are the priority sector. What reforms or the pace of reform should be there in supporting fuel to these sectors?
I think what has happened is that this sector is looking like an anarth bacha. Right. It's a absolutely uncared for sector. Right. The problems are not such that cannot be mitigated. Right. If the government decides that they want to look at it seriously, pick up the problems, whether it is coal, whether it is gas, whether it is a pricing mechanism, and also the PILs which are happening today are in many cases have people behind it who are trying to stop the power sector from really coming up. So I think what really requires is government to be very interactive in this sector, see to it that problems have taken sorted out and really resolved. I'll just give you an example. In 1972, we had the Green Revolution of India. Illiterate farmers of India caused the Green Revolution. There was no TV, there was no communication, illiterate
no internet,
farmers, nothing. Access to villages was not there. But the Indian farmer was able to cause a revolution, the Green Revolution, and since then till now, almost we never had to beg for food from any country. Now, this is the kind of revolution we need to do in power, in infrastructure, also in housing. We need to create revolutions, and where the determination of the government should be, under any circumstances we declare war. We will succeed. We will succeed in a time frame. And I promise you, governments have that capability. What it needs is direction and continuous interaction with the power sector, with the energy sector, with the infrastructure sector, and it can happen.
Sir, another important factor also is the tax structure. Actually, we have issues on the GAR. We have reforms also on the tax infrastructure, taxing. What are the reforms or the push that the industry or the industry chamber expects from this GAR issue or the taxation issues?
First of all, nothing should be retrospective.
Right.
I think anything which is done retrospectively looks like cheating.
Right.
You know, you're likely somebody has done a tax planning, has done some kind of a
Right.
thing based on the existing laws, and then suddenly the laws are changed. I think it's a little unfair. Having said that, I think what is the policies which is going to be for the next 5 years should be put on the table and be very clear. But what is happening is the implementation of some of these policies are very, very dangerous.
Right.
The officers tend to victimize the people, and it's not question of planning. Anybody who does anything can be held up, and then it doesn't know, he's not secure as to what the tax effect is going to be.
Right.
I think this needs to be removed. Luckily, I think the new finance minister has identified some of these problems, and I think I'm hopeful that they will clear the air. If you clear the air, people are willing to invest.
One last word from you on, of course, on real estate sector. So we need urbanization in a very proper phased manner. Our policymakers also announced it many times. What real estate, and people always feel how the prices will cool down. Just one shot.
There is no secret. The whole world has done it. Housing is not a problem of India.
Right.
It's the problem of the whole world.
World.
We have solved it in all the countries, capitalist countries, communist countries, poor countries, rich countries.
Right.
We've had solutions to the problem. What we need is a housing revolution.
Right.
We have to create a policy for land. We have to create a policy for investment.
Right.
And we need a policy for growth. But housing growth cannot happen alone. It has to be married with infrastructure. So if there is a housing project, doesn't have water, doesn't have roads, it doesn't have power, it doesn't have schools, it doesn't have electricity,
Right.
it's not going to work.
Right.
So what you need to marry housing problem is with associated infrastructure. Luckily, government has done it under the Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Mission. But it's not enough.
Yeah.
We need a much more focused area in which we can do.
Right.
If you marry these two, bring it together, public and private partnership can
Encourage
take place.
PPP. Yeah.
Government can do, MMRDA can do in Maharashtra, MHADA can do, CITCO can do, government can do in various agencies,
Right.
private can do. We did it in SRA. We made 50,000 houses free of cost
Right.
and gave it to government under MMRDA's rehabilitation scheme. The private enterprise did it against TTR. We can do it again. So there are many avenues which we can do, and we can successfully bring housing for all, for every sector. The only problem, of course, is the most economically weaker section and back, which needs a cross subsidy.
Right.
So we'll have to see that rich housing and poor housing, we need to create a cross subsidy for the poor.
Right.
If we do these two things, we can create housing for all.
Definitely, it's always a dream for everyone. Thanks, sir. Thanks for joining us on Business News. As you said correctly, everyone is looking at India, international investor, international economies, and we are fortunate enough to be born in this area of liberalization. And thanks a lot for joining.
Thank you.
Well, moving on.